everyone, and welcome back to another video, or welcome if you are new to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's video is going to be another Reddit scary story reading video. It's so funny because on my last video someone left a comment asking for this, and I was like, great minds think alike, because I was already planning on doing one of these. I also enjoy going through Reddit stories and finding some creepy ones, and it's just a little break from the true crime stuff. Obviously that takes a lot of research and time, so even though I had to still find these stories, it takes a bit less time. So sit back, relax, and let's get into some creepy Reddit stories. And these ones are all about experiences that have happened whilst camping or hiking, something along those lines. So let's get into the first one, which is called The Mysterious Music. My buddy and I were doing a weekend backpacking trip near the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. This was only my second backpacking trip at the time, so I was pretty inexperienced. We get a few miles into the trail and reach this scenic view spot. Just gorgeous. Up there was a man and his dog. We get chatting for a bit, and my buddy and I agree this guy is just giving us off vibes. His questions went from innocent to trying to get odd information out of us. How long we'd be there, where we wanted to set up camp, if anyone else was with us, that type of stuff. It was a bit off-putting, so we decided to leave. We ended up setting up camp about 2 miles from there, and thankfully we had no more run-ins with that guy. But later that night, a scarier experience happened. As we're getting in the tent for bed, it was maybe 11 PM at this point. We're laying there for about 20 minutes. Neither of us could sleep due to the man from earlier. I begin hearing what sounds like a song up in the ridge about 30 yards away. I couldn't really make out what kind of music, but it certainly had a rhythm to it. This went on for what felt like 30 minutes before my buddy asked, "Do you hear that?" To which I replied, "You mean the music?" He said, "Yeah." We got out of the tent to look around and saw nothing. No signs of anyone around. And when we got out of the tent, it seemed to stop. We stayed awake for about another hour, and then eventually fell asleep. I'm not sure what was making that noise exactly, but our camp was next to a running river and a waterfall, and the music was certainly louder than both of those things. This second story is called Stalker Hiker. I was 24 at the time and working as a wilderness guide in western North Carolina, and I was on an 8-day off shift. I didn't have a permanent home at the time, so I'd spend my off time living out in the mountains off the parkway. This particular time, I was in camp late at night, just sitting by my fire, and a man roughly my age, maybe a bit older, walked into camp. He said he was through hiking the section of the mountain to sea trail that runs by the parkway. He said he'd pushed further than intended that day, and could he share camp? I allowed it, and we chatted casually before sleep. I woke up and he was gone. I piddled around for a few hours, and then hiked back up to the parkway where my truck was. I got in and trucked about 30 miles down the parkway, and hiked into I wake up and this guy is kissing the side of my face and my neck whilst I'm sleeping. Something you never expect to happen as a man. But fortunately, I am a man, and not a small one either. I cracked him in the head with my elbow and jumped out of my hammock, at which point he went for my long knife on my side. Fortunately for me again, I wrestled in high school and have self-defense training specifically for close quarters. We grappled briefly before I finally got behind him and was able to bar him unconscious. Once he slumped, I bound his hands and feet and dragged his ass to a tree and tied him to it. Then I hiked out to find his truck right behind mine, obviously. I slit all his tires and took my happy ass to Asheville. This next story is called Crime in Camp. A friend of mine moved to Colorado to go to a new college, and him and his new roommate decided to camp in San Juan National Forest to get to know each other better. On the way to the trailhead, my friend and his roommate found a guy having car trouble on the side of the road. They stopped to help him and figured that would be the last they saw of the guy. They hiked in a few miles and set up camp in a fire. While they were sitting around the fire, the guy they tried to help on the road came strolling through the woods and sat down. They were obviously weirded out and tried to make conversation with the guy to figure out what he wanted. After a while, he pulled out a gun and sat there talking to it, asking it if he should kill someone. They were very freaked out, and he made them both get on their knees in front of him, while he aimed the gun at their heads, one after the other. The roommate and my buddy were trying to figure out what they can say to calm this guy down, whilst he was obviously having some sort of an episode. His roommate decided to ease some tension by standing up and putting another log on the fire. Right as he stood up, the guy shot and killed him. My friend took off running into the woods and hid. The guy shot after him a few times, then apparently sat down at the fire talking to himself. I guess there was an ex-military guy camping nearby who heard the shots and came running with his gun. He found the guy sitting at the fire next to the body and beat the guy really severely. My friend hid in the woods all night until the emergency crews could come. The last I heard, the killer was facing the death penalty in Colorado. The next story is called The Prairie Prowler. I grew up in a more populated part of Iowa. I was in the Boy Scouts, and this happened when I was in middle school. We used to go on monthly camping trips all over eastern Iowa, but this one took place at a campsite just outside city limits, less than a mile and a half from my house. It was our first overnight camp out with a bunch of new guys in the troop. The campground had a huge open prairie field, and it was early fall. The grass wasn't fully grown, but was still tall enough to hide in, with wide flat patches in between. It was the perfect spot for nighttime hide and seek. Our rules were simple. Once you were found, you joined the search party. We prepared ahead of time. We dressed in black beanies and sweatpants. Also, we weren't allowed to tear up any plants for cover, but we could lie low in thick patches. I found the perfect hiding spot. From there, I could hear the search group moving across the field. I knew my best friend was somewhere near me, well hidden. If you imagined the field as a clock, I was at about 9 o'clock, my friend was at about 8, and the group was between 3 and 5. Suddenly, all their flashlights shut off, and it went dead quiet. I figured they were regrouping for a full sweep. The only sound I could hear was this deep crunch, like someone walking through wet snow coming from 8 o'clock. Thinking it was my friend shifting The night was dark, but this was darker. Its contrast against the background felt unreal, like an optical illusion. It was massive. Maybe lying on the ground made it seem even bigger, but its sheer size overwhelmed me. It had sharp edges, a beak-shaped face, and jagged spikes that ran from its head down its spine. When I spotted it, it had already passed me and was facing away, angled about 45 degrees toward the 1 or 2 o'clock position. I barely breathed, just short, silent gasps. It never stopped walking, and I couldn't look away. Once it reached the center of the clearing, it began to descend, like it was walking down invisible stairs. No hole, no disruption, just vanishing step by step. I watched it sink, eyes locked on the back of its head. As only its neck remained above ground, I finally started to feel a flicker of relief. Then it snapped its head towards me. 2 glowing red dots locked on mine. I assumed they were its eyes. Then, like someone slowly sinking underwater, its head disappeared, never breaking eye contact. The next thing I knew, my friend was shaking me in the middle of the clearing. "Dude, we gotta go, they're coming." I don't know how I ended up feet from where that thing had disappeared, but when I looked around, there weren't any big footprints. I asked my friend if he or anyone had come through this way. "Nope," he said. "No one's been out here for at least an hour. This is my first time in the clearing." I ran. I didn't stop until we got back to camp, and then I stayed by the fire until everyone went to bed. Days later, I talked to my friend again and walked through the fields during the day. I retraced its exact steps, but couldn't see anything of where it had been. Years later, on a church trip to the Appalachian Mountains, someone asked me about my creepiest experience. I shared this story, half convinced I'd imagined the whole thing. He went strangely quiet after I shared it, and I asked if he was okay. Then he said something that chilled me even more than the memory itself. "They watch us. They're always there. I don't know what they want. They never come in, but they're always there." This next story is called The Party Campers. Me and my family were on a week-long camping trip. Another family group was apparently doing the same thing, and they were loud. They would have large bonfires every night and just get blasted. They were so annoying. We were considering finding another camping area. After about 3 days of this, my brothers and I found out they had a kid with them, about 12. We tried to make friends, but to be honest, he was annoying. After another night of little sleep, my mum was going to cut the trip short. So that morning, my brothers and I went on a hike. The area we were at, you could cross this mountain river with fallen trees and built up old beaver dams. Yet, as we went one direction, we came across that family using an inflatable raft to cross the water. My brothers and I decided we didn't want to be in the same area they were at, and went somewhere else. When we got back to camp about an hour later, my mother was in a panic, and emergency vehicles were everywhere. The kid had decided to stand up on the raft when crossing, and went into the river. My mum volunteered for the day to try and help find him, but everyone knew that if they did, he wouldn't be alive. So we packed up a majority of the camp to leave in the morning while my mum was gone, and she didn't come back till after the sunset that day. This fact alone would have kept me from enjoying camping for some time, but that that night was the clincher. The family was still there and lit a bonfire and partied all night. And I do mean all night. The music didn't stop until about 7 AM, when search parties showed back up. We left not too long after and went home. I kept up with the news, and they finally found his body 3 weeks later near the bottom of the mountain. The report talked about how decayed and battered the body was, having gone through so many dams and log traps, so the whole thing was declared an accident. Yet I can still remember the sound and laughter and joy from that night after, and it makes me wonder. Needless to say, after that I don't mind day trips, but I prefer to be home at night instead of in a tent. But I seem to be the only one of my family. They all still camp when they can. The penultimate story is called The Woman in the Woods. A few friends and I had a long weekend, 5 days, off from school, and we decided to go camping in the North Georgia mountains. We packed a big 10-person tent. There were 5 of us, 2 guys, 3 girls, and loaded up my buddy's truck. He and I had some experience being outdoors, camping, hiking, hunting, and he's an army vet, so we packed really well and had all sorts of amenities like a propane stove, grill, fold-up cots, a portable shower. We were in it for the whole weekend. We left Wednesday afternoon and parked the truck in a small town and started hiking into the woods to find a spot. It was a fairly normal hike until we got about 4 to 5 miles in. The first time we noticed something strange was when we came into a little clearing in the woods with a big pond in it. We stepped into the open area and everything stopped. No birds chirping, no squirrels running around. Even the clouds and the wind seemed to stop moving. My buddy and I both thought, well shit, there's gotta be a predator nearby, and took out our handguns, just in case. I've never seen a bear in Georgia, so we figured it was a mountain lion or maybe some coyotes. My friend and I were looking around the edge of the clearing and he grabbed me. He nodded across the water, and when I looked, I saw what seemed to be a woman standing just at the tree line. She was maybe 150 yards away. We assumed she must live somewhere nearby, and so we continued walking past the water and clearing. As we headed back into the woods, I looked over my shoulder at where she was standing, but she was gone. The sounds of the forest returned once we got into the trees. We made a campsite about 2 miles past that, as it was getting late and we didn't want to be stuck building camp in the dark. We got everything unpacked and set up and built a fire. We popped a couple of beers and sat down to hang out. There was a girl I was interested in on the trip, and we had been flirting, so after a few beers and the sun was down, we snuck away from the fire under the pretense that she wanted help setting up part of the tent. We started fooling around, and after a few minutes she stopped and looked at me funny. I asked what was wrong and she said, "Nothing, it just got really quiet." We both quickly dressed and headed back outside to the fire. The others hadn't noticed anything strange and didn't mention anything wrong except joking with us that it took us a long time to fix the tent. On the first morning we found that the propane stove had been turned on but not ignited and had gone empty overnight, but none of us had used it. The second morning we noticed some things had gone missing. A lantern we left outside by the fire was gone. My crush's sweatshirt she left on a little folding chair was also gone. We figured we just must have misplaced things, or someone had used them and put them somewhere else. During the second full day, Friday, we were looking for a waterfall that we read online was in the area. We were following the river upstream when everything went silent again. My buddy nudged me while we were walking and indicated up to the top of a hill next to the river. I looked up through the trees and was just able to make out the figure of the same woman, same clothes and all, just standing. I couldn't tell if she was looking at us or not, but she was just standing there. My buddy told the girls he thought he saw a mountain lion following us and was gonna go scare it off. He hustled up the hill making a lot of noise and came back about 10 minutes later. He said he scared it off to the girls, but he pulled me aside and told me that the woman wasn't there when he got up there. We found the waterfall and put it out of our minds as the girls decided to skinny dip in the river. When we hiked back to camp, we found it a mess. It wasn't totally trashed, but it was clear something had gotten into our stuff. We told the girls it was probably raccoons, but we both took our guns to bed with us. That night, shit went sideways. I remember waking up because my crush was squeezing my arm. We had been sleeping cuddled up together. I opened my eyes and she hushed me before I could ask what was wrong. There was complete silence all around the tent. I looked across the tent and my buddy was sitting halfway up looking around. We both stayed awake for the next 2-ish hours until the sun started coming up, and then packed our stuff and we all headed out. The entire hike back into town was eerily silent. There were a couple of points I thought I saw the woman through the trees, but never got a clear sight of her. We avoided the pond completely and got back to the truck in what seemed like half the time it took to get out of camp. After we were safely on the road back home, the girls and my buddy all started to tell everyone about moments they thought they heard or saw the woman all weekend, but were too freaked out to mention it, like she would go away if we ignored her. The wild part was, none of us could describe her face. It's almost like it was blurry. And the final story is called The Tapping on the Window. We went on a group retreat type thing over a full weekend about 8 years ago. My husband and I and our 3 girls who were all under age 10. This was an annual occurrence, but we were flush that year as a result of our company doing well. As a result, we avoided the communal bunkhouses and decided to rent a camper. The RV rental place explained that it would cost the same for 3 nights as it would for 2. So we decided we'd return it on Monday, despite the retreat being over earlier on Sunday. So the weekend went great. It was super hot and we were happy to have AC. We didn't notice it at the time. Different people being in and out all day, not staying in the RV much over the weekend because of activities. But the previous renters hadn't bothered to clear out the septic lines in the camper. By 6 o'clock Sunday evening, it stunk horribly and was backing up into the toilet. My husband was anxious about the rental company blaming us, so he decided to go to Walmart in the neighbouring town for some Drano. Mind you, this particular location, while open all year, is rarely occupied outside of retreats. I'll confess that we haven't been back since this occasion, so the details of why don't really come to mind, but as I recall, it was privately owned by a church in the area, and they used it mostly for their own purposes and events. So my husband leaves at around 8:30 p.m. for Walmart. It's an hour plus round trip thanks to the rural area and skinny back roads. I start straightening the camper, packing our belongings and getting the kids settled. He'd been gone for a self-reassuring checklist. It's the trees scraping the glass, nature, a sound in the environment nearby, or an axe murderer. That was an option too. I got up and walked very slowly to the kitchen, and the noise followed. As I was climbing up into the loft area over the truck, I heard the door handle rattle, and then the scraping sound. I got a knife as I passed through the kitchen, which I was clutching sweatily as I held down on the edge of the bed in the loft, guarding my children. I eyed the cabin, making sure every access point was locked, and hoped whoever it was definitely a whoever at this point, would go away. I leaned left and right, trying to get signal on my cell to call camp security or my husband or anyone, but it wouldn't dial. I waited, panicking. It was about 5 minutes of torture later that I saw headlights through the portholes on the side, coming along the winding road to the RV sites, and my husband entered the cabin, looking at me weird. He scoffed at me for being a city girl and told me that people didn't break out of prison and attack women and children in random rural campgrounds. I expressed that I'd heard the door rattling and that it wasn't a coincidence of nature, but he brushed me off. We passed the rest of the night without incident, though I was too on edge to sleep. The next morning, we drove into the town to return the RV. On the once-over demanded by the rental agreement, the manager came around to my husband and asked if he knew what had happened to the rear window. It seems that someone had used a switchblade or some similar item to remove the gasket from around the window where the back bedroom was, where I'd been reading the night before. There were gashes in the paint consistent with knife marks, and the gasket had been sliced off. The window lock was also damaged. It seems whoever had done it had also tried inserting the knife in the door's lock in another attempt to gain entry. Fortunately, they didn't get in, and we were not charged for the damage to the RV. Needless to say, I never consented to a solo camping trip again, and always go in a large